Marble floors, gold trim, contracts, audit reports, partnership agreements, and 2 years of Park Jae-hyun's empire scattered across the lobby. And Park Jae-hyun, the Korean Mafia boss who had never chased anyone, was on his knees in front of me.
Amara, don't.
I straightened the lapel of my cream cape blazer, then I walked out while the man who had made every woman beg stayed on his knees and watched the only woman he had ever chased disappear.
I want you to picture this. Marble floors, gold trim, contracts, audit reports, partnership agreements, and 2 years of Park Jae-hyun's empire scattered across the lobby like confetti after a celebration nobody survived. 8 men stood around him in black suits. Men who had stared down rival families without blinking. Men who carried his orders into rooms where ordinary people would have been too afraid to breathe. Men who had watched other powerful men lose everything and never once looked surprised. That night, every one of them was frozen. And Park Jae-hyun, the Korean Mafia boss who had never chased anyone, apologized to anyone, or asked anyone to stay, was on his knees in front of me. Blood marked one side of his face. His tattooed hand was cut across the palm where he had grabbed a broken frame during the fight upstairs. But the injury was not what made the room silent. It was his voice. Amara, don't. 2 words, the first plea I had ever heard leave his mouth. Behind him, the final international withdrawal notice lay open on the floor. My signature was at the bottom. The last company willing to protect his legitimate empire had officially walked away, just like I had. He reached toward me. Give me one chance. I stopped at the glass doors. I turned around, not because he still had power over me, but because I wanted to look at his face one final time and make absolutely certain there was nothing left in me waiting for him. There wasn't. I straightened the lapel of my cream cape blazer. Then I walked out, while the man who had made every woman beg stayed on his knees and watched the only woman he had ever chased disappear. But this story did not begin with Jae-hyun begging. It began 2 years earlier, when I still believed waiting patiently was the same thing as being loved. So let me take you back. I met Park Jae-hyun at a charity auction in Manhattan almost 3 years before that night. He was the most still person in the room. Not quiet, not shy, still. The kind of stillness that made everyone else adjust themselves around him. Politicians lowered their voices when they reached his table. Businessmen laughed too quickly at things he barely smiled at. 6 Korean men in fitted black suits stood far enough away to look casual and close enough to reach him before anyone else could. Officially, Jae-hyun controlled private security firms, luxury hotels, shipping companies, and half the nightlife in 3 cities. Unofficially, he was the man powerful people called when problems needed to disappear before sunrise. I was not impressed by any of that. I had spent 9 years building Val International Risk, a consulting firm that helped foreign investors decide which companies were worth trusting. My work was quiet, legal, and brutally precise. I could look at a beautiful balance sheet and tell you where the bodies were buried without ever touching a shovel. That was why I was at the auction. One of my clients was considering a partnership with Jae-hyun's holding company, and they wanted me to observe him outside a boardroom. He noticed me before I introduced myself. "You haven't looked at the stage once," he said when he appeared beside me near the champagne table. "I already reviewed the donation list." That wasn't my question. "No," I said. It was an observation dressed like one. His mouth moved almost into a smile. "Almost. What are you looking at?" he asked. "You." Most men would have enjoyed that answer. Jae-hyun became more careful. "And what have you decided? That everyone in this room is trying to impress you, and you're bored?" For the first time that evening, he looked directly interested. He invited me to dinner 3 nights later. I declined. He sent flowers. I sent them to a hospital. He invited me again. I declined again. The 3rd time, he came to my office himself. That should have warned me. Park Jae-hyun did not pursue people. People pursued him. In the first 6 months, I knew him. I watched 3 women from his past try to return. One called his private line for 4 days, until Jae-hyun blocked every number she used. One waited outside his hotel in the rain, wearing a dress too thin for the weather. Another sent a handwritten letter every Monday for 2 months. Jae-hyun never raised his voice. He never mocked them. He simply refused to move. "They always come back," Jae-hyun told me once. Jae-hyun was Jae-hyun's senior lieutenant, the man who had stood beside him before the hotels, before the tailored suits, before people started calling their organization an empire instead of a crew. Why? I asked. Jae-hyun looked toward Jae-hyun's office. Because he makes distance feel like punishment. Most people would rather beg than be erased. I remember looking at the closed office door and thinking that would never be me. I was right. Just not for the reason I believed. Jae-hyun and I became involved slowly. At first it was dinners, then late-night conversations after meetings, then weekends in cities where neither of us had to explain why we were together. He never lied to me about his world. He also never fully opened the door to it. There is a difference. I knew his legitimate companies. I knew the international partners who kept those companies clean enough for banks and governments to touch. I knew which rival family controlled which district, and which smiling chairman was more dangerous than the men carrying weapons outside his office. But I was kept in a strange middle space. Professionally, I was essential. Personally, I was invisible. My firm rebuilt the risk structure of his entire international division. I negotiated the trust clauses that kept 3 overseas partners from walking away. I created the independent review system that allowed his hotels and shipping companies to pass audits despite the rumors surrounding his name. Every major international agreement carried the same condition. Val International Risk would remain the independent compliance authority. If I resigned, withdrew certification, or reported unauthorized interference, the partners had the right to freeze operations immediately. Jae-hyun called that clause unnecessary. I called it the reason respectable money agreed to sit beside his. He signed it. For 2 years I protected everything he was building, and for 2 years I asked him for one thing. Let me be real in your world. Introduce me to your family. Let me sit beside you at the table where decisions are made. Stop presenting me as a consultant in rooms where everyone already knows I sleep in your apartment. He always had a reason to wait. His family was complicated. His enemies would use me. The timing was wrong. He needed to secure one more alliance. One more quarter, one more deal. Wait. So I waited. I learned when to be present and when to disappear. I learned the difference between the nights he needed advice and the nights he needed silence. I learned how to sit beside a dangerous man while half the city burned in his favor and make him believe peace had always lived in the room. I gave him 2 years of that. 2 years of learning him like a second language until I could read his moods before he spoke and almost forgot what my own instincts sounded like. Then one night, his phone lit up on the coffee table beside me. Park Soo-ah, a name I had never heard him say. He was in the next room speaking to Jae-hyun. I did not open the message. I did not touch the phone. I only saw the preview. I'm coming home. This time, nobody will stand between us. The sentence disappeared from the screen, but something inside me stayed awake. The next morning, I started asking quiet questions in quiet places. What I found broke the last 2 years into pieces I could no longer arrange into the same picture. Park Soo-ah was Jae-hyun's first love. They had been together for 3 years before her family sent her abroad. Some people said she left to protect him. Others said she left because at the time, he was still a street-level enforcer with ambition and no empire. The details changed depending on who told the story. One fact did not. Everyone close to him believed he had never truly let her go. Not once. Not even while he was with me. Then a former associate said something over the phone that emptied every thought from my head. When he first saw you at the auction, he said you reminded him of Soo-ah. I sat very still. Reminded him how? The way you carried yourself, the eyes, the voice when you challenged him. The man paused. I assumed you knew. I hadn't looked like Park Soo-ah until that moment. Then suddenly, I looked exactly like her. Every memory changed color. The morning he watched me across the kitchen counter and I thought, he sees me. The weekend in Busan when he reached for my hand and I thought, this is real. The first night he said, don't go. And I believed it was the most honest thing anyone had ever said to me. Now every moment carried a second face. He had not been looking at me, he had been looking for her. And I was the closest thing he had found in 4 years. I did not confront him immediately. I checked the systems I was responsible for first. That decision saved me. Sua's name had already appeared in 3 restricted access logs to Jae-hyun's international division. Someone had issued her temporary authority over documents she had no legal reason to see. I asked Jae-hyun about it that evening. He stood at the window of his office with the city behind him. "Sua is helping with the transition," he said. "What transition?" "An internal one." She accessed 2 partnership files and the Eastern Meridian escrow report. His expression hardened slightly. "You are monitoring her?" "I monitor everyone who enters restricted systems. That is the job you pay my firm to do." She understands this organization better than most people. She has been gone 4 years. She helped build the foundation, and I built the structure, keeping it from collapsing. Silence settled between us. I waited for him to recognize what he had just said without saying it. He did not. "Amara," he said, softer now, "do not make this personal. There are sentences that end relationships before anyone officially leaves. That was ours." I nodded once. "I'll preserve the access records." His eyes narrowed. "For what?" "For my files." I walked out before he could answer. That night, I made a decision so quiet nobody around me noticed it had been made. Have you ever realized you were not being loved? You were being used to fill the space another person left behind. Comment already awake if you know what it feels like to see the truth before the other person realizes you have stopped believing the lie. A week later, Jae-hyun invited me to dinner at the tower. His inner circle would be there, his senior partners, his family representatives, the men who controlled the darker half of his empire, and the executives who made the legal half look untouchable. After 2 years, he was finally going to introduce me properly. "As my partner," he said. I looked at him across his desk. "Why now?" He held my gaze for half a second too long. "Because you asked." "No, because Sua was coming." He wanted to place me at the table before she arrived so he could tell himself he had treated me fairly. I went anyway. Not because I still wanted the introduction, because I needed to see exactly how far he would let her go. The dinner was held on the 43rd floor of his tower. Glass walls, black marble, a city view designed to make everything below look small enough to control. 8 members of his crew lined the private entrance. Ha-jin stood nearest to Jae-hyun, silent and watchful. The legal partners knew me. The underworld men knew my name. But that night was the first time Jae-hyun placed his hand at my back and said in front of everyone, "Amara Vale, she stands with me." 2 years late. Still, a small and foolish part of my heart reacted. Then the elevator doors opened. Park Sua walked in wearing red. She moved through the room like someone returning to property she had never stopped believing belonged to her. And Jae-hyun's face opened. Only for a second. One unguarded, uncontrolled second before he rebuilt the stillness. But every person at that table saw it. I saw it. Sua saw it most of all. "You must be Amara," she said. Her smile was warm enough to deceive anyone who had not spent a career studying risk. "Jae-hyun has told me so much about you." He had never said her name to me once. I smiled back. "Then you already know I document everything." Something flickered in her eyes. Jae-hyun did not notice. Dinner began. Sua performed familiarity like an art form. She knew which wine John preferred. She remembered the name of Ha-jin's late father. She told stories from the years before the tower, before the hotels, before Jae-hyun learned how to hide danger beneath expensive wool. By the 3rd course, she had the older men laughing. By dessert, she had repositioned herself at the center of the table without once asking anyone to move. Jae-hyun let it happen. Not because he was trying to humiliate me. That would have required him to remember I was there. Twice, he forgot. Once during a toast, when his eyes went directly to Sua. Once when a question about the Busan expansion was addressed to him and she answered on his behalf. He did not correct her. I looked at Ha-jin. He looked away. That told me more than any confession could have. After dinner, everyone moved into the adjoining lounge. Jae-hyun was pulled aside by 2 district captains. Ha-jin followed. Sua came to stand beside me at the window. Below us, the city glittered like evidence. "I want to be honest with you," she said, woman to woman. "Then be honest. You have been useful to him." I turned my face toward her. She smiled gently. "I mean that as a compliment. The international structure, the respectable partners. You helped him become someone people like your clients could sit beside without feeling dirty. And you came home to enjoy the result?" I came home because he never stopped being mine. She stepped closer. You know what you were, don't you? He chose you because you reminded him of me. The same controlled voice, the same refusal to be impressed, even the way you look at him when you think he is wrong. Her eyes moved over my face. You were comfort, a beautiful substitute, but still a substitute. The small recorder inside my clutch captured every word. It had been running only since she approached me. I did not need it to capture anything else. The tower's security system had already preserved the corridor footage, showing her handing an unauthorized access card to one of her allies before dinner. I had ordered that footage, locked through my firm's independent compliance account, the moment the system flagged it. Sua believed she was speaking to a wounded girlfriend. She did not understand she was also confessing to the woman responsible for certifying every international agreement she planned to control. What exactly do you want? I asked. My place. And mine? She looked toward Jae-hyun. He never had one. She walked back to him. Jae-hyun turned when she reached his side. She said something that made him glance at me with the tired expression of a man who believed two women had created an inconvenience he would eventually manage. I set down my glass. I walked over and waited until the men around him became quiet. I am leaving, I said. His brow tightened. I'll take you home. No. The single word made Jae-hyun look at me. Jae-hyun's voice lowered. Amara. Everything that happened tonight has been preserved. Sua's restricted access, the corridor footage, her conversation with me. Sua's smile disappeared. Jae-hyun looked from her to me. What are you talking about? I sent you an alert last week. You told me not to make it personal. This is not the place. You're right. I picked up my jacket. The proper place is in the formal notice my office will send at 9 tomorrow morning. His entire body became still. What notice? My resignation as Independent Risk Authority for Park Global Holdings. For the first time that night, the room stopped belonging to Sua. Jae-hyun stared at me. You cannot resign in the middle of the meridian closing. I can resign at any time under Section 12. You insisted on that freedom when you signed the agreement. His legal director looked down. He remembered the clause. If Vale International withdraws, I continued, all 3 foreign partners receive immediate suspension rights. Because someone under your authority accessed protected documents after I warned you, I am also required to report a governance breach. Sua stepped forward. This is emotional retaliation. No, I said. Emotional retaliation would be destroying something that belongs to him. I am only removing the protection that belongs to me. Jae-hyun's eyes stayed on my face. Come to my office. I spent 2 years coming to your office. Amara, do not do this here. You brought her here. That landed, not because I raised my voice, because I did not. I looked at Jae-hyun. The evidence archive is locked. A copy will go to legal at 9. Another will go directly to the partners. Jae-hyun gave one slow nod. He understood exactly what was about to happen. Jae-hyun did not follow me to the elevator. He stood in the center of the room, surrounded by men who had watched him make enemies disappear, and let the only person who could have stopped the collapse walk away alone. The doors closed between us. I called my brother Daniel before the elevator reached the lobby. I'm coming home, I said. He did not ask why. He only said, tell me when to book the flight. I returned to Jae-hyun's penthouse at midnight. He was still at the tower. I had less than 2 hours before one of his men would arrive. I did not rage pack. I made tea. I sat at the kitchen counter and looked around the apartment where I had spent 2 years mistaking access for belonging. One drawer in his bedroom, a section of the closet, a key he had given me after 14 months as if it proved something. No photographs of us in the rooms where guests might see them. No place card at family dinners. No public acknowledgement until the exact night the woman he truly wanted came home. I said goodbye to the version of myself who had called that patience. Then I packed what was mine. Clothes, documents, my mother's teacup, 3 books, the black dress I had bought for a family dinner that never happened. I left every gift he had given me, the watch, the earrings, the coat his assistant chose because he had forgotten my birthday until noon. On the counter, I placed my key beside a plain white envelope. Inside was 1 sheet of paper. Thank you for the time. Goodbye. 6 words. No accusations, no request for an explanation. No invitation for him to promise he would become the man I had spent 2 years pretending he already was. I rolled my suitcase to the elevator. As the doors closed, relief moved through me so cleanly it almost felt like grief leaving my body. At 1:47 a.m., I uploaded my signed resignation. At 2:03, the first partner received the governance warning. At 2:18, the Meridian closing was suspended. At 2:41, Jae-hyun called me. I watched his name light the screen. For 2 years, women had called him repeatedly while he decided whether they were worth answering. I declined once. Then I blocked the number. Comment already left. If you know the difference between walking away in anger and walking away after your heart has finally become quiet. By sunrise, the first fracture had opened. Eastern Meridian froze its funds pending an independent review. 2 European hotel partners paused expansion. The bank financing Jae-hyun's shipping acquisition suspended release of the final tranche. None of that happened because I stole from him. I did not move $1. I did not expose his private world to the press. I did not call his rivals. I told the truth in the exact channels the agreements required. His empire had been built on force, loyalty, fear, and one thin bridge to legitimacy. I was that bridge. He had spent 2 years refusing to give me a place in his world, while depending on me to keep that world standing. When I removed my name, the respectable money stepped back. When the money stepped back, old allies became cautious. When allies became cautious, rival families became brave. And when rival families smelled weakness, the empire Jae-hyun had built stopped looking permanent. It happened in stages. The first week, 3 deals froze. The second week, one of his district captains defected to the Han organization and took 2 clubs with him. The third week, a port authority opened an investigation into documents Sua had accessed. By the end of the month, people who once waited hours for Jae-hyun's approval stopped returning his calls. He did not lose everything because I attacked him. He lost everything because he had built the strongest part of his empire on a woman he treated like she was temporary, and because the woman he chose over me had been weakening it from the inside. Jae-hyun found my note at 4 a.m. I know because Hajin told Daniel months later. He stood at the kitchen counter for a long time with the paper in his hand. Then he called me 12 times. When every call went unanswered, he used another number. Then another. Then Hajin's. The man who had made absence feel like punishment was learning what it felt like when someone no longer feared being erased. He sent a car to the airport. My flight had already left. He sent men to Daniel's house. They remained across the street because Daniel's attorney informed them that one step onto the property would trigger a police complaint and a press release. I did not open the curtains. I slept 11 hours. When I woke up, my mother's tea was on the kitchen counter, and my best friend Kezia was sitting on the back porch with 2 plates of food and enough patience to let me tell the story from the beginning. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair. "You don't sound like someone who lost a man," she said. "I don't? You sound like someone who finally put down something heavy." She was right. I had put it down. For the first month, I did not date. I did not want a replacement for Jae-hyun. I did not want another powerful man to prove I was desirable. I did not want to build my healing around being chosen by somebody new. I worked. I went to therapy. I took long walks with my mother. I slept without checking whether someone had entered the apartment. I ate dinner before 10. I remembered that I liked music in the kitchen and hated sleeping with the bedroom door open. Small things returned first. Then my sense of humor. Then my appetite. Then my ability to imagine a future without comparing every room to one I had left. 6 weeks after I came home, Daniel invited me to a small dinner with 2 people from his professional network. One of them canceled. The other was Cha-Jun Seo. Jun was a finance strategist who specialized in rebuilding companies after leadership failures. He was Korean, calm, and successful enough not to announce it every time he entered a room. Daniel had known him for 3 years. "He has been trying to introduce us for a while," Jun said, after Daniel disappeared to take a suspiciously long phone call. "What took him so long?" "You were unavailable." The answer was direct, not judgmental. I appreciated that. Jun did not sweep me into a perfect new life. At first, I did not trust him. When he called exactly when he said he would, I assumed he was performing consistency. When he remembered a book I mentioned, I wondered what he wanted. When he disagreed with me without punishing me afterward, I waited for the punishment to arrive later. It never did. Jun also had flaws. He worked too much when he was anxious. He became quiet instead of admitting when something hurt him. He hated asking for help, and once tried to assemble an entire dining table without instructions because he believed confidence could replace screws. But when I called him on those things, he listened, not perfectly. Honestly, there is a difference. We were friends for 3 months before our first real date. On that date, I told him the truth. I'm not interested in disappearing inside another man's life. Good, he said. I don't have enough room in mind for 2 people pretending to be me. I laughed for the first time all evening. Then he became serious. I don't need you to trust me quickly, Amara. I need you to watch what I do and decide at your own speed. That was how Jun loved me, without demanding credit in advance. He met my mother after 5 months, not because he wanted to impress me, but because she had invited him to Sunday dinner, and he was too nervous to admit it. He brought flowers she did not like. He burned the bread while trying to help. My mother adored him anyway. With Jun, peace did not feel dramatic. It felt repeatable. While I was rebuilding, Jae-hyun was losing control. Soo-ah moved quickly after I left. She told him the frozen partnerships were temporary. She blamed me for overreacting. She convinced him that I would return once the anger passed because every woman returned eventually. For 2 weeks, he believed her. Then Hajin found the hidden transfer instructions. Soo-ah had been using Jae-hyun's trust to redirect decision-making authority toward companies controlled by her family. She had promised a rival organization access to 2 of his freight routes in exchange for support if the international division collapsed. She had not returned only for love. She had returned because Jae-hyun had finally built something worth taking. Hajin preserved every record. The restricted access logs from my firm matched the tower footage. My recording proved Soo-ah knew I was essential and intended to remove me. Her own messages proved she expected the resulting collapse to make Jae-hyun dependent on her family's money. Hajin took the evidence to him. Jae-hyun listened to my recording alone. He heard Soo-ah call me a substitute. He heard her say I never had a place. Then he heard my voice, calm, controlled, already gone. Hajin later told Daniel that Jae-hyun replayed one sentence 5 times, "You never had one," because by then he understood that Soo-ah had not created that humiliation by herself. He had spent 2 years proving her right. Jae-hyun removed Soo-ah from the organization immediately. He handed the financial evidence to his attorneys and the appropriate authorities. Her allies abandoned her as soon as they realized the records were complete. But exposing her did not repair what had already broken. The partners no longer trusted his judgment. The bank no longer trusted his controls. The rival families no longer feared his reach. Most importantly, Vale International Risk would not return while he remained in control. My board supported that decision unanimously. 3 months after I left, Jae-hyun sent me a formal proposal. He offered double my previous fee. I declined. He offered equity. I declined. He offered to remove himself from the international division and place Hajin in charge. I reviewed the proposal and agreed to one temporary condition. My firm would supervise an orderly withdrawal that protected innocent employees and legitimate investors. I did not return for him. I returned for the hundreds of people who had salaries, families, and futures tied to companies that should not be destroyed because one powerful man confused love with possession. For 6 months, my team worked remotely with Hajin. We separated the hotels from the compromised holding companies. We protected employee pensions. We helped clean partners exit without panic. Every safe asset that could survive was transferred into new ownership. Jae-hyun's personal control became smaller every week. He signed every document. He did not fight the process. Maybe he believed cooperation would prove he had changed. Maybe he finally understood that some consequences are not negotiations. Either way, I never spoke to him directly. Until the last day. 10 months after I walked out of his apartment, I returned to Park Tower to sign the final withdrawal certificate. June offered to come inside. "No," I said. "I need to finish this as myself." He nodded. I'll be across the street. No argument, no performance, no demand to protect me from a decision I had already made. The tower looked different, the same gold trim, the same marble floors, fewer guards. The giant Park Global emblem had been removed from the lobby wall, leaving a pale outline where the Empire's name used to be. Jae-hyun met me at the elevator. "You look well," he said. "I am." He looked as if he wanted to say more. Instead, he handed me a visitor badge. The final meeting took place on the 43rd floor, the same floor where Sua had returned and Jae-hyun had forgotten I was in the room. This time, the table held no dinner, only documents. Attorneys sat on one side. Representatives from the final partner sat on the other. Jae-hyun stood behind Jae-hyun. Jae-hyun looked thinner. The stillness remained, but it no longer controlled the room. For the first time, it looked like what it had always been. Amara. I took my seat. We reviewed the transfer. The final hotel group would leave his ownership. The remaining shipping licenses would be surrendered. Jae-hyun would control the smaller domestic security company under independent supervision. Jae-hyun would retain money. He would retain property. But the empire, the network of fear, influence, international legitimacy, and unquestioned loyalty that had made his name powerful, would be over. The attorney placed the final certificate in front of me. "If Ms. Vale signs," he said, "the withdrawal becomes effective immediately." Jae-hyun looked at my hand. "Amara." It was the first time I had heard my name and his voice in 10 months. I picked up the pen. He stood. "Give us a moment." The partner representatives refused to leave. "This is a formal closing," one of them said. Jae-hyun's jaw tightened. Then an alarm sounded in the corridor. Not a fire alarm. A security breach. Jae-hyun reached for his phone. 2 guards moved toward the doors. The doors opened before they arrived. Sua stepped inside with 3 men from her family's organization. She looked different from the woman in red. No polished smile, no illusion of control, only fury. "You are signing away what belongs to us," she said to Jae-hyun. "It never belonged to you," he answered. "It would have if you had listened." Her eyes found me. "And you think walking away made you powerful?" "No," I said. "I was powerful before I met him. Walking away only helped me remember." One of her men moved toward the document. Jae-hyun blocked him. The next few seconds were fast and ugly, but not chaotic. A chair overturned. A glass frame shattered against the wall. One of Sua's men struck Jae-hyun near the brow before the guards closed in. Jae-hyun caught the broken frame as it fell toward one of the attorneys, cutting his palm. His guards forced Sua's men back into the corridor, while Jae-hyun called building security and the police already waiting downstairs under the terms of the closing. Sua screamed at Jae-hyun as they took her away. "I came back for you." He looked at her without emotion. "No, you came back for what I built." Then his eyes moved to me. "And I lost the woman who helped me build it." The doors closed behind Sua. Silence returned. Papers covered the floor. Contracts had slid from the table. The broken frame had scattered glass across the marble outside the conference room. Blood ran across Jae-hyun's tattooed palm. I signed the final certificate. The partner representative countersigned. A notification sounded on 3 phones at once. The withdrawal was complete. Park Global's last international partnership ended at 6:17 p.m. Jae-hyun had lost the empire, and now we had arrived at the scene I showed you in the beginning. We entered the lobby together because the attorneys required the original certificate to be handed to the closing agent downstairs. His 8 remaining men stood near the glass doors. The documents displaced during the confrontation had been carried down in open files, then dropped when one of Sua's men tried to break free from security. Contracts, audit reports, and 2 years of everything Jae-hyun had built lay scattered across the marble. I handed the certificate to the closing agent. Then I turned toward the exit. "Amara." I kept walking. His footsteps came behind me once, then stopped. When I turned, Park Jae-hyun was on his knees, not because anyone forced him down, because for the first time in his life, power had failed him, and he had nothing left to use except the truth. His crew stared. Jae-hyun lowered his eyes. Jae-hyun reached toward me with his cut hand. "Don't." The word cracked in the middle. The man who'd watched women call, wait, return, and beg was now kneeling in front of the one woman who had never come back. "I know what I did," he said. "I know I saw her when I looked at you." I know I kept you outside my life while using your strength to hold it together. I said nothing. I thought you would stay because everyone stays until I decide they can leave. His voice dropped. I thought you needed me more than I needed you. That was your first mistake. I loved you. No, I said. You became capable of loving me after losing access to me. That is not the same thing. He flinched. I walked closer, but not close enough for him to touch me. I did not leave because of Sua. I left because of you. His eyes closed briefly. You chose me because I reminded you of her. For 2 years I was a placeholder you depended on and hid. I protected your companies, your people, your reputation, and your future. I asked for one thing, to be real in your world. You gave me a drawer after 14 months and a seat at your table only when she came back. I looked around at the papers on the floor. That was not love, Jae-hyun. That was management. I can change. I hope you do. Then give me the chance to show you. No. The word was soft, final. He reached into his jacket and removed a small black ring box. Of course he had brought one. The old version of me might have seen proof in that box. She might have believed a ring could retroactively turn 2 years of secrecy into commitment. I saw only timing. A grand gesture arriving after every small moment that mattered had already been missed. You cannot fix this by kneeling in a lobby with something I no longer want, I said. Fixing it would have looked like believing me when I warned you, following me to the elevator, reading my resignation before your deals froze, treating me like the real thing before you were terrified of losing me. His hand lowered. You missed all of those moments. I know. And I am not angry anymore. That hurt him more than anger would have. Being angry would mean you still had access to something inside me. I said, you don't. He looked down at the ring. What am I supposed to do with this? Learn from it. I stepped back. Take care of your people. Build something honest. Become a man who does not need to lose a woman before he learns how to see her. Then I turned toward the doors. Amara. I looked back once. He was still on his knees. The scattered contracts surrounded him. His men stood silent. The empire was gone. The ring was still in his hand. Please, he said. There it was. The word every other woman had given him. The word he had believed he would never need. I straightened my blazer. No. Then I walked outside. Jun was across the street beside his car. He did not rush toward me. He did not scan my face and demand a report. He waited until I crossed the road. Is it finished? He asked. Yes. How do you feel? I thought about it. Free. He opened the passenger door. Dinner? Somewhere ordinary. The place with the terrible chairs? And the good soup. He smiled. Perfect. That was the whole celebration. No champagne, no audience, no need to make Jae-hyun's loss the center of my new life. Just soup, terrible chairs, and a man who understood that peace did not have to perform to be real. 6 months later, Jun proposed in my mother's kitchen. Not at a gala. Not in front of cameras. Not after nearly losing me. He had come over to repair the cabinet door he broke the week before. My mother left the room because she knew what he was planning. I did not. He did not give a speech about destiny. He said, I know who you are when you are strong, tired, suspicious, joyful, and completely unreasonable about how towels should be folded. I don't want a version of you. I want the whole person. Will you build a life with me? I said yes, not because he rescued me, because he never asked me to disappear in order to love him. Hajin sent Daniel one message after the engagement became public. He saw it. That was all. Jae-hyun did not come to my door. He did not interrupt the celebration. He did not send another ring. For once, he respected the boundary before it had to destroy something. Maybe that was the beginning of his change. It was no longer my responsibility to find out. They say every dark romance has a moment when the powerful man finally understands what he lost. Jae-hyun had that moment on a marble floor surrounded by the contracts of an empire that could not survive the woman he refused to value. But his understanding was not my victory. My victory happened earlier, at midnight, with one suitcase, one key on a counter, 6 words on a page. Thank you for the time. Goodbye. That was the moment I chose myself before anyone else. I had spent 2 years believing I was close enough to his love that patience would eventually make it mine. I was wrong. I was not his first love. I was not his final love. I was the woman who showed him that people are not permanent simply because you have grown used to their loyalty. I was his lesson, and he was mine. He taught me that being needed is not the same as being cherished. Being hidden is not the same as being protected. Being given access is not the same as being given a place. And being chosen only after you leave is not the same as being valued while you stay. If you are inside something that is making you smaller, listen carefully. You do not need to wait for a dramatic betrayal. You do not need to wait until the whole empire collapses. You do not need the person who overlooked you to kneel before your worth becomes real. You are allowed to believe the pattern before it destroys you. You are allowed to remove your name from what survives only because you keep sacrificing yourself to hold it together. You are allowed to pack quietly. Leave the key, write the 6 words, and walk toward the life that has been waiting for you to stop begging for a place in someone else's. Park Jae-hyun made every woman beg. Then I walked away. He lost everything, and I finally found myself.